Hello everyone, and welcome to Lane 6. Some say it was removed from the game because otherwise Zombie Titan would be way too far to the side of the board. I'm your host Jotto, and with me for this week is my co-host Hectares.
Hey guys.
Yeah, we're missing a guest this week, and this is not intentional. We were trying to get one, but it was a little difficult. For next week, we are definitely going to try and get someone on from the community and get a third person in on these podcasts. It's always nice to have three people. So anyway, for this week, we are going to be going over the news and community news, and we've got several topics for this week which you can see on screen at the moment. We have the two Weekend Warriors, the one that's been announced for tomorrow, and also the last one, so Singleton and the Secrets of Solace, I guess, celebration thing, is that what they're calling it?
Yeah, the celebration weekend.
Okay. Then we have the patch notes for 3.1. We don't know the cards yet, but we know the changes. Most of them affect draft, which means we can talk about that a little bit. Then we do have the pre-con sale and the fact that they're going away afterwards. We'll talk a bit about organized play, and then the Forge Watch Invitational. And with that, I will hand it over to Hectares, who will go into more depth with that.
So just to get started with this past weekend's Weekend Warrior event, it was a 4-faction singleton, and I don't know how many queues you ran with this. I ran exactly one queue for the 4 factions in singleton, and I liked it, but I wasn't going to invest the time to build a deck. I think would be really competitive with it. Did you try it out?
I practically farmed it.
You farmed it. So what did you think? Because you sound like you have a lot more experience with it than me.
Basically, actually, I've got solforge on screen, so I guess I can bring up the deck if I still have it. I don't know if I still do, because I usually get rid of decks pretty quickly. No, I'm actually currently missing the deck I was playing. But basically, most people were trying to play these weird, most people were just trying to play these weird, I have 4 factions, let's do a Tarsus deck with 1 Tarsus and a million token generators from all the different factions. Yeah, I just put a bunch of really good cards into a deck, most of which were heroic and legendary, and stomped people.
Yeah.
I just had a plan for everything. Something else I discovered, Killian was the best Forgeborn, because you could level tech cards.
Yep.
Tangle was the best removal, because every single deck had either a Lion Strategist or Frostfang Maiden, or Predator. Mm-hmm. Predator was really good.
Yeah, Predator.
Thundersaur was insane, because it turns out Thundersaur is broken if you don't have 3 copies of Answers. So it just ran the entire format. Most of my wins were from Thundersaur.
Just a lot of really good stuff, creatures, and a couple of sort of situational things that allowed you to pick, with Killian, pick occasionally that particular card that's going to be better in the matchup. That's kind of interesting. I tried to run a Brood Queen list, basically saying, look, it's been absolutely dominating and constructive. Maybe I can make something happen with this 4-faction thing, and it was basically one of all the cards I would normally run in a Brood Queen list, and then a few extra of the sort of similar cards. So for example, GGP being in there, as you said, probably in almost every list that could get away with it. I did miss out on some of the the bound cycle, which I saw a lot of in the 4 games that I ran. I ended up winning 1 of the 4 games, so it was late in the weekend, and I think a lot of people had spent more time than obviously I had, and figured out what was effective, at least for them anyway.
The bound cards, though, I played all 4, and I did not enjoy playing with the Eloyan card at all. I did not have fun playing with that stupid Eloyan bound card. I played it sometimes and it helped, but it was really irritating.
It seems like that one's the one that people sort of unanimously agree that is the worst of the 4 in terms of the bound.
But anyway, so unless there's anything else to say, we'll move on to the other Weekend Warrior.
Yeah, so this upcoming Weekend Warrior is the Secrets of Solace celebration, and it has same entry fees. It's actually a double Weekend Warrior event. It's the same entry fees as Draft and Constructed, but with the alternate payout of Secrets of Solace packs that scale with how many wins you get, as well as a guaranteed alternate art Dire Hound, which is actually pretty great because that means that anybody participating in this event gets that alternate art. You can participate as many times as you want, that you have tickets for, and still end up with a copy for each time you participate. So you can complete that playset, just play a few queues, and enjoy the weekend, celebrate as Secrets of Solace, and I don't know, just have some fun, collect some packs, and you get that guaranteed art to go along with it.
Yep. And for anyone who hasn't been able to store packs for the 8 cards, I'm not sure if it's worth storing packs for 8 cards, but Secret Solace is a fairly small set, so I guess you could get away with it. This is the best way to do it. I'm gonna play 3 constructed queues because you don't get tickets out of it. So I'm just gonna buy some tickets, play 3 constructed queues, hopefully get 15 packs and 3 Altar-Zillion Dire Hounds. But if you're into drafting, if you're very, very good at drafting, it's a good excuse to pick up 30 Secrets of Solace packs.
Is it really 10 packs?
It's the equivalent in tickets, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that makes sense.
It's insane. Like, you're paying, basically, you're gonna, unless you have a ticket bank, you're probably gonna have to buy the tickets, but if you think about it this way, a lot of people have been saying, oh, that's annoying. But the tickets are worth nothing compared to the actual packs, not to mention you get a new release coming at the beginning of next week, which will be in those packs if you save them. And
Right.
an alternate art Dire Hound, which is in every deck that plays Necrim.
Right, so this is a good excuse to burn some tickets, right? This is a high value for per ticket invested, probably than we've seen in quite some time. So I like this one. If you don't have tickets saved up, you know, maybe throw some money down for this one. If you do have tickets saved up, feel free to burn some because this, they haven't done too many opportunities like this. Hopefully they'll do some more like this in the near future. I think the alt art is a big pull for a lot of people.
It's a good event.
So moving on with that one, sort of in the same line, the pre-con sale is on this weekend through Sunday night Pacific. And what's going on is all the pre-cons in the store are going to be cleared out from the store. But in the meantime, 50% off, just sort of like a going out of, it's your last chance opportunity to get those, and it's actually also the last chance to get the Rise of the Forgeborn booster, which I don't believe is on sale, but if you're looking to collect some of the cards there, you didn't feel like crafting them, you just like buying boosters, that's your last chance to get that as well.
You need to get those Forgeborn if you don't have your 3 auras as yet, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think the precons are actually for some people are going to be a really good value, and for other people they've collected most of those cards. But any deck you're buying that's giving you 2 legendaries that you don't have, ends up being a pretty good value, especially at the 50% off. So I like this sale. I like that they're sort of moving out the inventory and getting new inventory in. I think that gives people incentive to make a decision about it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I'm not sure whether you wanted to talk about the iOS 8 thing, but I'll just mention it briefly. iOS 8 came out. It's causing problems for people on just their regular iOS 8 device, whatever device they're using that they upgraded on. So my recommendation, just like last week, was just wait for the solforge patch to come out because it will fix any compatibility issues with iOS 8, and upgrading early with iOS 8 anyway is always risky. So
Yeah.
so that's basically it for news this week.
We do have a lot of community news this week, though. There was quite a few new shows.
Well, right. So, in terms of sort of exciting video and other content going on, and basically a lot of video content that came out this week, Hans did a Set 3 design versus development review, and development in the sense of how does this fit with the progression of the power level of the game, the way that the cards all fit together. So he talked a little bit about the various mechanics introduced, as well as how they've sort of played out in the metagame, which I thought was a really cool piece of content. And then later on in the week, we had Tiny's patch notes video, which we'll mention the patch notes shortly, but he basically covered all of the little changes here and there and his anticipated impact on it. And then in between those two things, I think it was the first episode of Solforge Showdown. Now, Jotto, what the heck is Solforge Showdown?
It's funny you're asking me because you were also on that video. But anyway, solforge Showdown was a video that me and Hecht put together on Tuesday, I want to say, which is the first episode in a series where we both take a deck from either, I guess, the Forge or a tournament or Chaos Ladder, or probably from maybe the Forge Watch Invitational coming up, things like that. Go over a couple of those lists and go over them in depth at the beginning, and then play a couple games against each other with those decks, figure out how the matchup works, sort of which are the key cards, and how to roughly play against those decks. And this week we did Technonauts AT Wolves deck against Tabaluga, I think. Yeah, Tabaluga's NU consistent deck, which he called Proto.
Yep.
And that was an unheroic, keep in mind. And it was an interesting couple of games to play. It was definitely worth watching, I think, in my opinion.
I have to say, after doing that, I was very confident with the AT wall deck, and I entered one of the events on this week, which was the Casual Soulforge Wednesday event, and I ended up getting stomped. So it wasn't exactly the same experience, but I think it went to show exactly what we talked about at some point during the showdown, which was there are a lot of viable unheroic decks out there right now, which is a lot of, it makes for a pretty fun metagame.
Still like my Shapers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So that was sort of the highlights I saw for this week in terms of interesting content around the community.
All right, so unless there's anything else, we'll move on to our first major topic for this week, which is the patch notes for 3.1.
Patch notes.
Patch notes.
Yeah.
Now, I was debating bringing these up on screen, but I think that doesn't look particularly nice, and the Solforge website hates me with that stupid support button when you try and minimize it. So
Okay.
what I'm going to do is I'll just bring them up on screen and say what the changes are, I think. So let's get this up on... let's get this up so I can actually read it. So we already mentioned the iOS thing, and the rest of the patch. We've got 8 new cards. This is actually a pretty small new card addition, but I think the reason for this is because these seem to be constructed focused, not draft focused, because they're all heroics and legendaries. That's my take on that.
That's interesting. I hadn't really considered them as constructed focused, but I think that's an interesting way of looking at it because obviously the heroics could be draft shaping as well. It sort of depends on how they interact with some of the other cards in the set. But that said, you're absolutely right. This is something that's going to be more of an impact on constructed potentially.
Generally, commons and rares are supporting cards when it comes to constructed decks, and the reason for that is because in draft you can't make a common ridiculously good, otherwise it breaks the format. Cue Seal of Deepwood. But generally things like basically commons and rares that see that warp draft formats and make 3 off play in every single deck with their color are either too good for their rarity because of draft, or are utility based on the metagame, like Cold Week, for example. So that's a decent way of looking at commons and rares. They're designed to support because draft exists, and you can't just do what you like with commons and rares, because it turns out people can get multiple of them in draft.
Yep.
Whereas heroics, they tend to like doing powerful things with heroics because they don't show up too much in draft. They do every so often, but they're also much more accessible than legendaries, so they can go ahead and make those a bit more flashy.
Well, the thing I wanted to or was reflecting about was the recent inclusion of things like Spore Lord and Brood Queen in draft environment, and how even a single pick of one of those, and it's a slam first pick if you see one of those kinds of things, it's the question of let's say there are 4 very powerful heroics. Maybe they do have an impact on draft that sort of isn't necessarily intended, or maybe is intended based on what they've been seeing so far.
But I mean, the point I'm trying to get across is Heroics do affect draft. Legendaries don't usually affect draft. Most legendaries are
Yeah.
either
Well, I agree with that. I
niche.
mean, there's no chance.
They're either niche and therefore bad in draft, but they do cool stuff like Varric Skull.
Yeah.
Or they're really powerful finishers like Phoenix, which you could never get away with in draft if it was common. Like, that's just ridiculous because the game is much slower. So there's reasons why things are legendary beyond their flavor, because you can't do certain effects are not broken and constructed, but in a format that's much slower, you can't really inject those en masse into a format. So they're not. Basically, what I take from this is that the heroics might have an impact on draft depending on how good they are in slower formats, but I would say that they're trying to impact draft as little as they can.
I see.
Injecting in the other, like in set 1.1, they impacted draft massively because they introduced Tarsus and like Zephyr Mage and things like that, and those are common and rare, so it impacts it a lot more. Alright, the new pre-constructed decks, we have no idea what these are yet, but they're going to have one copy of an unreleased legendary and one copy of an unreleased heroic. That's all we know.
Yep. So theoretically, you want to acquire a playset of these 8 new cards. You can drop down whatever the cost of 4 times each of these, or 3 times each of these precons is.
If you want to buy the entire new set immediately in the most inefficient way possible, I guess you could buy each precon 3 times.
It may or may not be inefficient for somebody without the other cards in the set. So that's the thing to keep in mind. For a newer player that doesn't have, or even a mid-tier player that hasn't, anybody who basically hasn't collected most of the cards in the game, it might find these very appealing.
Yeah, I could see that. Card updates, we'll get to those a little later. We've got, the iOS 8 thing we already mentioned. Now, the individual card changes, some of these are hilarious typos, which were fixed already, but they're just in an actual patch now. The first one on this list is actually Avalanche Guardian. So I'll bring this up. Now, Avalanche Guardian is the defender with mobility in Tempest. Now, this is getting a stat increase, or an attack increase, of 2 at every level. So it's becoming a 5/8, 9/15, 15/23. That's a pretty big increase when it comes to a defender with that much life.
Yeah, this is probably one of the biggest buffs, just in terms of raw stat number changes.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Draft, it's obviously better, because 5/8 is huge at level 1 in draft, and it has mobility. But I actually think this may see some unheroic play at this point. I'm not sure though, because it means you don't have to jetpack it. All you have to do is use an instigator on it and it already has mobility.
Yeah, it's already got mobility. It's a little bit flexible to work with because sometimes you want to get creatures with defender off of the board if your opponent is running some kind of glacial crush or wall breaker. So something with mobility allows you to use it as multi-lane removal or multi-lane block play, which at least is a little bit higher value than single lane where your opponent can just ignore it.
Yeah, that's always one of the problems with defenders in general. They just kind of sit there if your opponent ignores them if you don't have enablers.
Yeah, so I mean, Flame Rift Instigator definitely changes how people can interact with defenders, both for aggressive reasons as well as defensive reasons. You can now take a Flame Rift Instigator and turn off the defender on your opponent's creature without giving it the attack buff, and just deal with it with whatever creature you want, which actually feels a lot better than wasting a play on.
That is true. I love using
something.
that on Stasis Warden personally.
Yeah. Perfect target there.
Perfect target. Alright, on to the next change. Blight Witch. That's the consistent Necrium card. That's just becoming a zombie. We already knew about that. It's already in the game actually, but it has to be put down somewhere. Cinder Colossus. Now this one is both an interesting buff and also kind of makes sense when you start to think about it. Basically, the level 2 is getting buffed up by +1/+1, so 13, 14 instead of 12, 13. I guess this is to bring it more in line with Citadel Guard, but it still feels weaker.
Yeah, I mean the level 1 is small, and Citadel Guard has a giant level 1. It makes sense to give Cinder Colossus a slightly bigger level 2 in order to compensate for that payoff. They are different factions, so it's not exactly equivalent, but now that we're having A and T paired so closely together, I think this is a good buff.
Yeah, I can agree with that. The level 3 the difference between the level 3s is actually quite small, but the difference between the level 1s I think is still a little too large maybe, but I don't know, I'm happy with a buff to this thing because it means that you can play it and just have it as a massive underdrop as a blocker if you're not in the defender deck, if you really need to. So that is something you can use this for if you have like a meta sculpt or something. Alright, Cloud Reaver Titan. Now, I have something when it comes to mobility creatures called the Wind Primordial test. And Cloud Reaver Titan failed the Wind Primordial test spectacularly. Like, actually spectacularly. So they buffed it quite heavily, to be honest. It's getting plus 2 health at level 1, plus 1 health at level 2, and then plus 3 health at level 3. Interesting stat distribution buff there. So it's becoming a 4-7, if it's opposite from something, a 4-7, an 8-10, and a 12-16. To be honest, I'm happy with those stats without its, on a mobility creature, without its upside.
Yeah, I think those match up a lot better with the number of 6 attack creatures that have sort of started appearing, and as well as even 7 attack creatures. So this is something where, in order to beat it, you kind of have to make the most of your like underdrop type creatures to clear it.
Yeah, I mean this thing will hit very very hard, and it feels a bit like some of the other really big on the health mobility creatures like Ortec Warhammer. Not as powerful obviously because in draft we've already talked about the rare versus heroic thing, and it's not allied either, but I think it's still a similar principle. The reason why that card is good is because you can hit them once, and then the chances of it dying in one swing are quite low, so you can usually hit them a second time.
Yeah.
And I think this applies here as well. It's pretty hard to kill.
So you're saying it passes the Wind Primordial test now?
I think what it's done now is instead of trying to contend with Wind Primordial, it's changed into a different type of mobility creature, so it doesn't even apply anymore.
It's its own card now.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas before it was like a rare Secrets of Solace wannabe Wind Primordial with like slightly more health and a way worse offensive power.
Nice. Well, that sounds like a good step in the right direction for Stoneblade in terms of that card design.
Yep, I agree. Alright, and someone in chat has just mentioned that Cloud Cleaver 3 is pretty much almost guaranteed 36 damage now.
Which sounds, that sounds great. And it's a lot easier to get it there. It's a lot easier to get it there than it was before. If you were to try and get it to that 12-13, that's not a big payoff, but 12-16, that's going to survive one hit. So that's, you talked about that already, but, saying 36 damage, that sounds really good.
And I'm going to say that if there is some sort of, not now, but I like referencing on Heroic when it comes to commons and rares. I think once set 4 comes out in the future, and that if there's a couple more mobility creatures, then maybe some sort of unheroic mobility deck. Because in standard you've got all the heroic powerhouses, so something like Cloud Cleaver Titan could never make it. For mobility you've got all the crazy ones like Predator and Frostfang Maiden and things like that. But when it comes to budget formats, I think it's always been slightly... it may just be slightly under where it needs to be at the moment, just because it doesn't have a home.
Yep.
But in draft, definitely much better, and that's what I'm happy about this patch. They fixed a lot of the draft problems, I would say. Alright, on to another card which failed the Wind Primordial test spectacularly, Cragwalker. This one literally is just a bad Wind Primordial. Like... at the moment, at least. Like, it just has less mobility, less health, same attack. It's just terrible. But it's being upgraded at level 1 and 2. It's gaining 1 attack at level 1, 2 attack at level 2. Do you think that brings it in line a bit to the point where you can actually pick it in this draft format?
So the only thing I want to note before really commenting on it is that it has dinosaur creature type, which makes any kind of balanced decision. Yeah, you have to take into consideration a creature type that already has support anyway in terms of a tribe.
Or is this the
Dinosaurs not.
Pac-Man ninja logic?
This is Pac-Man Ninja logic. There's not exactly enough support for dinosaurs to be viable right now. But if you're going to start printing more dinosaurs, you have to keep in mind the stats, the abilities on them, and sort of what the impact of those kinds of things are. So while you're saying it's worst wind primordial, well, it's also a dinosaur. So the fact that it moves at all is kind of impressive, especially for a land-based
one already. Like the 7/3 with mobility and the allied breakthrough.
Yes.
It's not even close. Uber glider.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is not allied, so you're just getting the mobility. You don't have the opportunity for breakthrough. So it is a little bit. It's basically like a vanilla, but it happens to have mobility.
And it has less stats.
Yeah, and the stats are remind me of the 6/2 Etherforge Oracle, which actually has a more powerful effect, arguably, than the mobility.
I agree.
So, I'll be surprised to see this have a big impact, but it certainly helps when you're in that situation where you are deciding between a couple cards, and now the stats are a little bit bigger. Makes the decision.
What I do like about this is because it's now a 7-attack creature, Cragwalker I don't think is a mobility creature because it's way too low on the health. I think they gave 10-piece a Geist.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at the actual scaling on the attack, I mean you're swapping mobility for health, which is never a good trade at the moment because of so much Necreum in draft. But when it comes to actual blocking, it's definitely good at its job now at 7. Like Flame Rift Instigator was actually a good underdrop even if you never got the opportunity to enable defenders.
Yep.
But Cragwalker is one of those cards where every so often it does something, but it just feels so awkward to pick it. And if you get 2 of them because you just have to pick it because it's a creature, it feels pretty rotten, I must admit. The reason is because it's a good underdrop. The problem is it doesn't do anything besides being an underdrop. I think that's the problem I have with that card. Like Aetherforge Oracle is a good underdrop, but it also plays and levels a spell for free, which is usually Seal of Deepwood.
Mm-hmm.
So Aetherforge Oracle is a much more powerful upside. Not to mention you have a good chance of getting about 8 of them in a draft because no one picks them. You always get them.
Yeah. We'll see if that changes at all. I still anticipate being able to sort of pick them up as I go. Several available throughout.
Alright, now on to the most impactful change of the patch. Dizzy and Brood Queen. Now there's a funny thing about this which has already been fixed. Apparently it used to have test at the... no, it still does. They haven't fixed that yet. Some of these italics things, by the way, in this patch, some of them have been fixed, some of them haven't been. So it's actually confusing to figure out which one is in the game still. Like the Lyria and Varnus Pact ones have been fixed, but they're still on this patch notes.
I see.
So it's a bit confusing. But yes, there is a test at the end of level 2. Now, they've removed test now. Does that mean that they didn't test Brood Queen before releasing it? Or, like, are they just... Slight typo. They removed it from 1 and 3, but forgot about 2, apparently. So, Brood Queen has been tested now, guys. It's okay.
Brood Queen confirmed tested. Confirmed metagame shaping, dominating, tested.
95% of the metagame NU. Good job, guys.
But seriously, the actual change should change some of that.
Basically, the change is not to the Brood Queen itself, it's to that stupid offspring. It's now a 1/1, 2/2, 3/3, and it deals 1, 2, 3 poison when it deals damage. Not scaling anymore, because they've realized Venom Fang is kind of like... Venom Fang effect is good when it comes to, just putting it in front of it and poisoning. Shimmerfang Serpent effect is not fair on in a deck that can just buff it for free with a Tarsus or like a Roar or anything. Like it's ridiculous, and that's been taken care of.
poison that scales with attack is very scary. It's something that Shimmerfang Serpent is a card because of that. It's not a card for any other reason than that one ability. So to give that ability to a token that comes for free with another creature that has a very strong ability that ha- couldn't quite find a home in decks previously, constructed decks previously, but you give it this free other basically full card almost, and suddenly people find a spot for it. Because what happens is you're making your deck almost more consistent when you play a card like that, right? You're going from a 30 card deck where you have to run 2 cards to pull off those 2 abilities to a 30 card deck where you're getting 33 cards worth of abilities, something like that. So I think it's a very important change that they've made, and something that players will thank them for later, even if, especially the players that like were relying on it, say, now I don't have a deck, why did you nerf my deck, that kind of thing. I think that reaction will be limited in its scope, but surely there will be some players who say, this card is unplayable now, even though it probably still finds a home.
Before I give my opinions on this, I just want to point out that we have David from Stoneblade Entertainment in chat, which is awesome. And yeah, we've got Weekend Warrior in 2.5 hours apparently.
Oh, hype!
So that's
I'll
awesome.
I'll definitely be playing at least 3 queues. We'll see if I do more than that, but I'll definitely be getting my Dire Hounds.
Or do you want the Dire Hounds?
I want the Dire Hounds. I love the Altar.
I think people who don't have Secrets of Solace cards will want those packs. People who do, apart from a few legendaries, will want those Dire Hounds.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good Weekend Warrior. But anyway, as far as Brood Queen goes, we've talked a little bit about this before, and I'm an NU player through and through. I play other decks as well, but I'm an NU player from like when Tarsus came out, and even before then I was running Dorky Delver decks. So I'm gonna find a way to put Brood Queen into a deck. I don't think it's unplayable. I think a Scorch Flame Sorcerer effect that gives you another guy and has a better body is still good. Like, I still think that's powerful, and
Yep.
the Offspring, while being nowhere near as good as it used to be, is still decent. I don't think Brood Queen is like highest priority anymore, but it's still pretty powerful just because of the effect and the Lotuses and Echo Wisps and things. So I definitely think that Brood Queen will still be around. Maybe the current NU lists will mutate a bit, so they only have 2, or I don't think you cut down to 1, but I think 2 Brood Queen and then running a bit more of like Nephrax, Doom Rider, Engine, or something like that.
That's kind of cool. Just making more use of the room, like sacking the token kind of play.
Yeah, Brood Queen is... this is something people don't seem to understand. Brood Queen is like the name of the deck and is also what people attack. But Brood Queen is what made the deck broken. Brood Queen is not what made the deck. Like, it was the little bit on the top. But it turns out they still have their Grim Gaunts that they can grow to ludicrous numbers very, very quickly. And they still have access to Nephrax. And I think... I won't call it Brood Queen anymore. It's going to be more of a Tarsus list, or just NU, like grow wide in general.
Yeah.
Is going to be a tier 1.5 deck at worst, in my opinion. It won't be the best deck ever anymore.
I think people will find a way to keep it relevant. It's actually very fun and at least high skill cap potential to play. So you have opportunities to make sort of tough decisions about which creature do I want to sacrifice, which creature do I want to clear, what's the priority on leveling certain cards. You get to make those for each matchup, and I think that's something that's going to appeal to people even with this change.
I think Sludge will see a lot more play once people get it. Like Lotus Cobra is in chat, I think, and he's been playing Sludge, and I don't think Sludge gets as badly affected than there's so many Brood Queen variants. That's the thing. Like, some of them will die off, but you can't say Brood Queen variants will die off because not all of them depend on Brood Queen as much.
Right, and we haven't even seen, we've seen about half of the legends explored at this point for set 3. I think there's still a lot.
I want my sleeping bears.
I know. I think once people get their hands on the rest of these cards and more players are sort of brewing with them and experimenting with them, we're going to still see this set 3 really expand a little bit.
Yeah, we could see the return of Plants. Like, you do have instead of Nuada, who dies to Yetis, which is always annoying. You now have Mr. Spore Lord, which copies any of them.
Well,
So
and also, I
that's a
mean,
bit.
you have sort of some option. Let's say you went for you Terra Tempest, new like a plant deck. You can throw Flamer of Instigator in and do some like really strange things with your Nuada plays. Like you can keep that thing alive. Like I don't know, you can do like Yetis and plants in the same deck. You can do all sorts of stuff. And I think it's the kind of experimentation that we need to get back into the metagame. Once people get over the Brood Queen dominance, I think we'll start to see some of that. So I'm really excited about these
Something else, by the
changes.
way, Thundersaur is coming back, which means Brood Queen is not going anywhere.
Ah, okay.
You can't,
Interesting.
like, as long as that stupid 036 is going to come down and be like, hey, I'm going to beat you eventually, there's going to be a Brood Queen list around killing it.
Hmm.
And if the UT list with, like, Firestorm, Static Shocks, Dozers, like, Thundersaurs becomes viable, which we don't know yet because there's, like, 2 people on the planet who have the cards to make it. So we don't know, but if that becomes an actual thing, then I think that would be quite fun to play, and you could try out something like that. And if that's the case, then Brood Queen will always have a home just because of that dinosaur.
Yeah, I like this idea you have of running a couple copies instead of running it as like your core of your deck. I think that's making it more of like a tech card. It sounds really good.
Yeah, less of a must-play card, more of a good in this situation card.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Brood Queen is the main change for this patch. There's a couple other ones though, and weirdly enough, the Brood Queen change is not the one I'm most excited about because I knew it was coming. So it's like, is there a Brood Queen nerf? Oh, there's a Brood Queen nerf. Okay. But
Yeah, it's like what else you got for me?
yeah, it's like what else? Yeah, I mean, obviously they needed to change Brood Queen. It was way too powerful. Especially, it was like bleeding into draft as well. Because that's one of the penalties of making a heroic so good. Is like, if a heroic is dominating standard and draft, then it's too good. Because then it means it's dominating 2 separate formats, which move at 2 separate speeds. Like, completely, and have different cards in them. Like,
Yeah,
entirely.
it's too versatile.
It's dominating both. So that's when you know something's wrong, I'd say. Anyway, on to the Firemane Steed. Now, the Firemane Steed is what Cloud Cleaver Titan, I think, is turning into, but Cloud Cleaver is a bit better. Now, Firemane Steed has been changed so that it has 2 extra health at all levels, I think? Yeah.
Yep.
This is actually a pretty powerful card now, I'd say.
So I like the mobility. That's all I really. That's the only real aspect of this card that I appreciate. I still am not impressed by the level 1 or L2 stats, but as you said, it's not. Well, it's just not as bad as it used to be. I think 3-6 you can get away with some early game plays. I think 6-9 doesn't quite get you there. I don't think it quite gets you there. I think there's too many underdrops that help finish that thing off. And I don't think I think you'll still lose board position by playing it in PL1, PL2. So for me in draft, I still do not pick this up. But you know, there's opportunities. There's opportunities out there for the right player.
I think it's situational now, as opposed to just bad.
Yeah.
Which is the main point. I mean, in my opinion, it's a bit like a mobility version of the Earth Giant. What was it called? Was it just called Earth Giant? I can't remember. From set 1, the 3/6.
Stonefist Giant.
Stonefist, yeah. It's a bit like that, but with mobility. The main problem is that you get punished at level 2 a little bit too hard, I think. But the problem is the level 3 wins the game a lot of the time. It hits them, kills a level 3, hits them again, and then kills a level 1. So it's difficult to you need to figure out a way of not just making it easy to just go, hey, level 3. I mean, the zombie, for example, Duskfire Zombie, is actually not terrible, and you get severely punished at 1 and 2 for that card.
Yeah.
So that's the way I treat Firemane Steed. I mean, Necrim can get away with it a bit more because they have a lot of debuffs. And they have a lot of on-level cards that are good against like same level or lower level.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of good underdrops. So they can get away with it a bit more, but I think 10-piece, they had their Stonefish Giant in the past. I think Steed is not as good, but it's difficult to get as good as Stonefish Giant.
Do you think Spirit Cleave goes up in pick priority for people?
At the moment, well, if 10-piece becomes a lot more popular, you're gonna need it to kill Clown Cleaver Titans without taking 30 plus damage.
Yeah. I think Spirit Cleave is just generally going to go up in value. Just having more creatures that are late game focused that you can take out. I think once people start realizing the effect of having a removal spell that helps in against certain types of creatures that otherwise can be game ending on their own, I think you'll find that things like Spirit Cleave can go up in value.
And with that, I'm going to sell the 14 or so copies of that card I have from random pack opening. Alright, so we've got Forge Guardian, Delta, and Omega. Now, David has filled me in that the changes, the reason it's being consistent is because they can change what happens online, but not offline. That requires a actual update. That's why the Brood Queen text hasn't changed, my text in general hasn't changed. However, the way they play has, like, packed. Because they need to roll out proper updates to change that information, but when it comes to just changing things online, for online matches, that's different. So it's interesting that he filled us in on that. Now, the Forge Guardians, basically Delta and Omega, are now fixed. Well, I mean, they were bugs that are now becoming official, you could say. Basically, Delta at the beginning of the patch, now it's been fixed already, they just need to update the wording, but Delta used to count your opponent's stuff as well, which was hilarious in draft. And Omega just didn't count as piece.
So yeah, a few of the changes in this patch are basically like, we made some small mistakes, they did have an impact, but we're completely resolving these things now. You can't do too much other than make the best of a weaker situation. You can say, look, this is it, this is the fix, here it is, and looking forward to seeing what you guys do with these cards now.
Yeah, exactly. Killian, I think this one has already been fixed. It's just being made sure it's fine, which was when it was brought into play, not from your hand, it didn't level something in your hand. I remember this when I was building a Loin Necreum deck, because I had Lyria in that deck, and I hit 3 Killians off 1 Lyria once. So I did notice that. But the rest of the stuff here, we've got Varnus Pack, Lyria, and Ortec Explosive. These are fairly well-known bugs that happened at the beginning when the client was trying to kill herself, for lack of a better term. So those have all been fixed, which is good.
Yep.
And there's a couple other ones like Phalanx Squadron, which had a double L in it, so that's gonna get changed.
Yeah, I know that one personally bugged a teammate of mine quite a bit, so I'm excited for that change just for that person.
That's awesome. Now this is one I did not expect, but I'm guessing this is because this particular card was supposed to make a large impact in Constructed and just didn't quite get there, which was Oratech Warhammer is getting a single attack buff at 2 and 3.
Yep.
That's interesting to me. As I said, I'm guessing this is because they want to push AT a bit. I guess one of the ways of nerfing one archetype is making the other ones a bit stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And AT, I think, is supposed to be good against NU. The problem was NU was just so good that the matchup, like how good it was in the matchup, actually just didn't matter.
I really like this change. I want to play with Warhammer. I think giving me incentive to play with Warhammer is awesome. I don't know what the, I would love to know more about how they made some of these changes, what they looked at in terms of balancing these things. I would just, any information that they felt like sharing, I would just, I'd read that article, I'd watch that video, listen to that, whatever audio they put out there. This is like a balance change like that. As you said, it's really interesting. It's something that probably there's enough thought that went into it that there's a lot to digest for players that are playing with these cards regularly. Might be something nice that they could put out there.
I think there's something to be said that Oratech Warhammer was supposed to be, in my opinion, it's supposed to be the partner to Killian. But because the decks, there were other decks that were just too powerful for them to even make a deck. Mm-hmm. So Killian was being tested out on a lot of like Necreum decks, just because you couldn't afford to play a 10-piece even though you really wanted to a lot of the time. But 10-piece has the flashiest win conditions along with Aloyan a lot of the times. They have Scorchmane Dragon, Phoenix, Iron Maiden now.
Right.
Minus Krogius, all the flashy ones are in those two colors. And Warhammer along with Killian, I guess you could run those as your only two levelers, and you could probably get away with some energy surges, maybe a couple Goxes. You could also play Battlebrand, and what's good about these cards is they punish you in theory. Like Warhammer needs to hit them. Killian is quite small, level 1, but gets better over time.
Right.
And Battlebrand is not quite as powerful as something like Burnout and can hit the face, which means it's kind of awkward that you have to hit your own creature sometimes to level something. But the point is that together they kind of compensate a little bit, and it means you can level cards without getting massively punished for it.
Yeah, I like that. You Battlebrand, something that's clogging a lane that Warhammer wants to move into. It clears the lane, you level a card in the process, then you hit battle and you level another card. Can be a really nice turn.
Yeah, something I have done a few times actually was like had a level 1 card. I think 2.4, one of my favorite tricks was have level 1 Iron Maiden, play Killian, level Iron Maiden, rank up 3. That happened a few times, and your opponent is never happy when that happens.
The double level.
Well, it's just like the one turn win. Although one thing I will say, if you're playing Iron Maiden and you're against a Stasis Warden deck, never play it. You will get killed by Glacial Crushes. That's my take on that. They never deal damage to it, they just give it Defender infinitely. So I guess if you have a Jetpack, it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, Iron Maiden Jetpack, that's how you beat Stasis Warden decks, guys.
Well, I think that's interesting, right? One of the big responses to the NU Brood Queen meta was Stasis Warden, right? But Stasis Warden doesn't work if there are decks that are running Jetpack as well, or Flame Rift Instigator. You know, you just can't have that deck be successful in any other metagame than the one where basically Aloyan and Aloyan Tempest get hated out by just Necreum decks. So that probably won't see the same level of play that it did going just for that short window.
Something to note, by the way, Warhammer, if you hit it on 3.1 going first, will now pretty much kill any underlevel card just by blocking it. Like 7 and 13 kills pretty much anything.
Yeah.
And it will trade with anything equal level now. So I mean, I like the card. I think Turkus has just mentioned it's a lot narrower than a lot of people realize. Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, you play it in a leveling deck. You don't just play it as a value creature. But I still think it's got its place, and this buff will help it out. Alright. Seal of Deepwood. The about change after Brood Queen. It is no longer Seal of Skillwood, in theory. And, oh, we don't have Utera enabled there. So, let's bring up the lovely, lovely Seal of Deepwood that has been ruining people's draft experiences and also every Unheroic tournament ever in the past, set. Let's be honest here, Seal of Deepwood was not a fair card. It just wasn't. It's like, you play this 1/1 buff, and then you win.
What do you mean?
If you get bored.
It's fair. 1/1.
Aetherforge Oracle. One of my many, many 4-0s was 3 seals, 3 Aetherforges.
You know, that's one thing that makes it, because it's a spell, really hard to balance, because there's so many ways of leveling spells for free. I mean, you can end up with, like, a draft deck with 5+ ways to level a card for free, including, if it's a spell, like a couple of Aetherforge Oracles.
Just play Metasculpt. Like, Metasculpt in, at the moment, I think Seal Post, it's basically, they changed the level 2 to 6/6. I think the reason for that is because they want level 3 to be really good, but level 2 is accidentally winning games every so often. It usually didn't happen, but every so often it did, and it's just like, what? You did not invest that much into that card. So they're trying to circumvent that. I do think that Seal will still see a lot of draft play. It may not be slam first pick on site, but it will still see a lot of play. And I think if you're in a Loyan, it will still be a slam first pick on site because you can just dodge the level 1 with a Metasculpt. Metasculpt or Ep.3 Oracle. And then the level 2 is not that painful to play. It's like a Elysian Shard, and then the level 3 still wins the game. So
yeah, I think
it's
if you
still
meta
very good.
transfer down a creature that is basically going to kill one of your creatures, you end up getting that free leveling a card of choice, and then you end up choosing Seal, seeing Seal at the next player level, and then getting to basically snowball some particular situation out of control of your opponent. And I think that still is likely to happen. Like you said, the only thing is the earlier snowball will be manageable, and you'll now have more of an opportunity to say limit your opponent's board to the point where they are either taking so much damage in order to play the Seal 3 that they basically lose before it gets them any value, or that they just have to pass it in level 3 because they can't take the damage. So I do like this change. I think it's the kind of thing that if players have learned their lesson in this time when it's been too hard for them to deal with, maybe they'll, when people played against them now, be able to better manage the board. So hopefully that this time period was like a almost boot camp for dealing with Seal of Deepwood type cards, because I would imagine this won't be the only card that's like this in the future. We have a sort of limited spell pool compared to the number of creatures we work with regularly. So maybe this will be the kind of thing we need, the skill that players need to have.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, in draft this will affect a decent amount. I think sap is going down in value because you can't just hit that lucky sap after a seal and just negate it. But I think Metasculpt is going up in value because if you can get seal to 3, then it still just wins, especially if you don't take too much of a hit for doing so. So I think Metasculpt has always been one of those cards that is not that good. But if you get one, it doesn't feel too bad at all. If you get 2 or 3, then it feels terrible. But if you get 1, it's one of those cards which I commended them for in Rise of the Forge one, where they tried to make spells in draft not feel terrible to level. And that was one of them because you get a free discard every time. So I'm glad to see that card going up a little bit in value because the level 3 is still good, whereas level 2 got nerfed. The other reason I'm happy the level 2 got nerfed is basically because I'm sick and tired of seeing this thing put on a batter hide after 2 Lydian shards and then playing a level 3 one and killing you from nowhere from like 103 swings. And I'm talking about the average on Heroic Tournament right now, if anyone's wondering. It's a little too broken in that format. Mostly because of batter hide more than seal. Like, batter hide is a balanced card until there's a broken buff spell. And then it just becomes stupid. So that's basically, I'm happy that that's changing up. I still think Seal will see play in Unheroic maybe as a one-off against the Wool deck. Because then if Wolves becomes more popular, then you just play it as a one-off, and if you're against Wolves you play it, and then it's good. But if you're not against Wolves you just ignore it. Because it's a bit too much of a tempo loss in that format now. But, yeah, it's... Why would I use Enrage? Yeah, that's actually a good point. Seal of Deepwood is still better than Enrage. To be fair, Enrage is not good. Like, I played some level 3 Enrages for some random wins in the past, but that was more me dumping leveling cards into it, not actually playing them. Or just random combat tricks I had to use it for. Enrage is not a good card. It's okay. But in this case, you're getting... Enrage is worse at 3 by far. At 1, it's slightly better. And that sounds fair. Until you realize consistent is on Seal.
Right.
And then it's not fair. But I don't think Enrage is a good... It's a bit like comparing Lightning Spark to burn spells and saying that there's power creep. Like, Lightning Spark is just not a good card. It's played because it's a burn spell.
Right. Yeah, so I mentioned this with dinosaurs earlier. Maybe this is something we we could give ourselves a framework for understanding how some of these things are balanced. I'm not going to say that Enrage doesn't just get outclassed by Seal of Deepwood, but maybe it's something to consider that there are going to be some spells in a particular faction that are going to be relatively weaker than other spells that do similar things because you need multiple of that effect in order to form sort of a particular concept with your deck where you're. Um, I'm blanking on the name of this card. That's the Utera plant that gains attack and health when
Yeah,
you cast a
the
spell.
Aether Sprout, I want to
Okay,
say.
so that plant, if you've got 6 cards that have the same power level of
Aetherroot.
Sealed Deepwood, maybe Etherroot ends up being too good, right? Now this is obviously that sounds hilarious because nobody's ever made that card good yet, at least not on a competitive level tournament.
Then Delvers, but you need to play spells instead.
Right. So exactly. So it's like, how do you balance around those kinds of cards if you end up with just all equal power level spells that are strong? You
Yeah.
know, so that diversity of power level and spells maybe is desirable in the card pool.
Yeah, I think the difference is for me that the two cards that I mean, just talking about Enrage here, the two cards that I've really been talking about in the past is Enrage is the baseline, where it's not. I don't think it's in draft anymore, right? Yeah, I don't think it's in draft anymore.
Yeah, not currently in the draft pool.
So the way I see Enrage is very, very different from Lightning Spark, and they're the ones that are compared a lot to the newer cards like Battlebrand, or in this case Seal of Deepwood compared to Enrage. The difference is Lightning Spark will see play in burn decks because it can go to the face, and that's sometimes useful. And Flame Lance can't always hit anything if there's nothing on the board. So often you need that burn spell, and it's an extra 5 damage burn spell that actually helps a lot. Enrage is different, however, because Enrage does not have a place in Constructed, and it was a draft card. So it makes sense that they would substitute it with a draft card that's supposed to reward you for using the new mechanic, as opposed to doing the whole decent, like Hungering Strike was the other one. Hungering Strike compared to Dizzy and Siphon. No one complains about that comparison. The reason is because of the allied. However, if it's in the right archetype, which turns out to be the best one at the moment, it's just ridiculous compared to Hungering Strike. But the main point is they are different draft formats, and as long as the card is not good enough to see constructed play, I don't think talking about which card is better is actually a valid point, because they are designed for draft, and the draft format has completely changed since then. So that's my opinions on the whole comparing it to set 1 cards. Because set 1 cards, the commons are not in draft anymore. So there's no point comparing to them if they never saw constructed play then, and they're not being pushed out by new cards. I don't really get the point in talking about power creep at all when it comes to commons.
Yeah, so maybe just experimenting with what that spell looks like, that spell idea looks like. Maybe the consistent was a requirement for something like an Enrage type spell to see constructed play. So this could be considered maybe an experimental spell slot. I don't know whether that's
had strength in numbers, didn't we, for Rise of the Forgeborn?
Yeah, that was that.
That was the Enrage version for that set, which it was better if you had a full board, but worse if you didn't.
I see. Yeah, is that still in the pool?
I want to say yes, because it was a Rise of the Forgeborn card, I think.
I'm not sure about that.
Strength. If it's a Rise of the Forgeborn card, then it is. Strength in numbers it was in set 1.1 actually.
Yeah, that sounds more, because it's been around.
So it isn't a Rise of the Forgeborn card. Alright, so it's a set 1.1 card, but that was the thing in that set about it. And I think that was to encourage Tarsus decks at the time, because that's when Tarsus came out. So, in draft at least. So commons are especially very important when it comes to drafting more as opposed to power level and constructed. The bound cycle has seen some play, but that's mostly because of how unique they are in their utility, as opposed to their straight power level. So the Dire Hound is not a bound cycle card, it's an overload card, and the overload cards I think were designed to see constructed. In general. One of them failed miserably, but the other 3 are. So I think that's just my take on the design thing as far as commons goes, when talking about them changing a common because it was a little too good with a consistent. But anyway, unless there's anything else to say, we'll move on.
Sounds good.
Alright. CEO of Cadre, and this is a hilarious typo. Apparently it says Tarjay instead of Target. I'm actually going to look this up. I did not notice this.
Yeah, most of these small typos were went unnoticed on my side of things.
The best thing is it's at all levels.